Hey writers, today we are going to be working on adding details to our writing. As we read this text, I want you to listen for places that the author uses details to make her writing more interesting. Okay, so our text this week is called A Visitor on the Bus. Tap, tap, tap. What? I said, turning around to face Jeffrey, a boy in my third grade class. Not to scare you or anything, but look. He pointed a little above my head at the huge bus window I was leaning up against. My head slowly looked up where the window met the metal frame. There was a bee crawling along the window frame on the inside of the bus. He was shaking his little stinger at me as he walked. Fear quickly rose up inside me and I began shaking in my shoes. I really had a dislike for bees, or I guess you could say I'm deathly afraid of them. I began trying to problem solve about how exactly to move away from the little insect. We were on our way back from a field trip to the zoo, and my teacher, Mrs. Porter, reminded us repeatedly that we are to stay seated. I glanced back up at the bee. Yep, he was still there, staring right back at me. Right about then, my friend Kelly noticed the bee too. I saw as her eyes grew big, and then they met mine, just as terrified. What should we do? Panicked Kelly. I don't know, but I don't want to get stung, and the bee is really close to my head. I'm telling the teacher. Mrs. Porter! Kelly yelled. Mrs. Porter looked back at us concerned. Our teacher began making her way down the aisle of the bus towards us. What is it, girls? What's wrong? Asked Mrs. Porter. That's what's wrong. I pointed to the tiny creature creeping back and forth on the window pane. Oh, yikes! Exclaimed Mrs. Porter. We watched as she calmly went back to her seat. I thought she was going to go back and sit down when I saw her grab a plastic bag and walk back toward us. All right, girls, duck your heads down and cover, she advised. We ducked our heads and covered. However, I looked up out of the corner of my eye to witness our teacher, shoe in hand, smacking the window repeatedly. Whack, whack, whack. I sat up and looked at our teacher as she examined the bottom of her shoe. Yep, I got him all right. Poor guy. I bet he was just buzzing around looking for a flower and somehow ended up on our bus. He was probably just as scared as you two. Well, good news is we are all safe, she said, and scraped the bee from her shoe into the plastic bag. She gave me a wink as she headed back to her seat. Crisis averted. Okay. So, in this story, I wanted you to listen for places that the author uses details to make her writing more interesting. Okay, so right now I want you to turn and talk with the person sitting next to you about where does this author use details to make her writing more interesting. So, pause the video and talk. Okay, we will see in this text that Mrs. Porter, in that that the author uses Mrs. Porter instead of teacher. We also notice that instead of saying bug, they said spider. And they also used third grade class instead of just class. Okay. So the next thing I want you to do is with your class, I want you to add more details to these nouns. Okay, so our nouns are book, dinner, and drink. Okay, so I want you to use more specific words to fill out this chart. Okay, When you are finished with this, I want you to go back in your writing. I want you to see if you can add more details to your nouns. And that'll be it. Have a good day.